It began with a promise written in gold but paid in labor. Egypt's wealth, legendary and vast, was quietly unraveling. Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, the ambitious architect of monumental temples and sprawling palaces, had overextended the empire's treasury, borrowing heavily from wealthy merchants and foreign lenders. At first, the gold flowed easily, but each coin spent on grandeur pushed the economy closer to the edge. The protagonist in this unfolding drama was the empire itself, its people unknowingly shouldering the weight of fiscal mismanagement. The betrayer was not a single enemy, but a system, greed intertwined with hubris, the insatiable demands of the pharaoh, and the opaque networks of creditors who profited while risk mounted. Cairo's bustling markets thrived under the illusion of stability, yet behind the scenes, the bureaucracy fumbled, accountants falsified records, and grain stores were pledged multiple times as collateral. Foreign lenders whispered demands, and Egypt's surplus became illusionary. A subtle unease gripped the empire. The people sensed that their labor and liberty were being mortgaged for monuments that would outlast them. Beneath the splendor of towering pyramids, a quiet crisis brewed, and once the debt came due, the empire would discover that gold could no longer buy freedom. The first warning signs were subtle, almost invisible to the untrained eye. Scribes in the treasury began altering grain inventories, reporting surpluses that did not exist. Temples recorded donations in gold that never arrived, while merchants whispered of secret deals and loans that the pharaoh's court had never disclosed. Even advisors grew uneasy. They noticed delays in payments to workers, some of whom were sent home unpaid or forced to work longer hours to cover shortfalls. Foreign lenders, once patient, began demanding partial repayment, threatening to cut Egypt off from critical trade networks. Yet no one could pinpoint the root cause. Was it ignorance, a miscalculation by overambitious planners, or a deliberate scheme where officials and contractors enriched themselves while mortgaging the empire's future? The line between corruption and incompetence blurred, leaving the empire vulnerable. The pressure mounted with every delayed grain shipment and whispered warning. Merchants grew wary, markets fluctuated, and citizens murmured fears of hardship. The grandeur of the pharaoh's monuments hid a growing instability, and each forged report, each hidden debt, was a ticking clock. The people of Egypt were standing on the precipice of financial collapse, and history was poised to repeat itself in the harshest way imaginable. Prompt 3. The betrayal revealed, the scandal breaks. Continue from Part 2. Write Part 3 of 7, 200 words. Expose the core betrayal or crime behind the title. Embezzlement, fraud, corporate sabotage, market manipulation, or political collusion. Describe how it was uncovered, a whistleblower, audit, journalist, or catastrophic leak. Show the emotional and economic fallout. Investors ruined, workers unpaid, trust shattered. End with suspense. How will justice or revenge arrive? Amid the chaos, Taharka, a diligent royal accountant, refused to bow to despair. Witnessing families go hungry and monuments halt mid-construction, he realized that inaction would make him complicit. Armed with the scribe's ledgers, he began piecing together the full extent of the embezzlement, tracing gold flows, forged grain records, and secret agreements with foreign lenders. As he delved deeper, a pivotal truth emerged. The empire's collapse was not the result of poor planning alone. Human ego, greed, and the lust for legacy had corrupted every level of administration. Ambitious nobles, complicit priests, and even close advisors had manipulated wealth to serve themselves, leaving the pharaoh's coffers hollow. Taharka knew confronting this network would be dangerous, but he also understood that only by exposing the masterminds could the empire survive. He began sharing evidence with trustworthy governors and key military officials, quietly rallying support. The first spark of revenge glimmered. The empire that had been bled dry could fight back. If the perpetrators thought they had outwitted the system, they had underestimated one man's determination to restore justice, and perhaps to reclaim what had been stolen from the people themselves. Taharka moved with precision. He began tracing the hidden flows of gold and grain, following the complex network of accounts that had enriched corrupt officials while starving the populace. Every forged ledger, every secret loan was cataloged, each piece of evidence forming a damning mosaic of greed. Knowing that confrontation alone would fail, he devised a careful plan to leak the documents to trusted provincial governors and military leaders. The information was distributed discreetly, ensuring that the perpetrators remained unaware until it was too late. Taharqa even orchestrated a subtle sting. Officials attempting to move wealth or bribe allies were quietly observed and recorded, creating a chain of irrefutable proof. Meanwhile, he began rebuilding local trade networks in provinces unaffected by corruption, creating alternative economic channels to sustain the people and reduce the empire's vulnerability. The villains, arrogant in their assumed invincibility, continued their extravagant spending, blind to the trap closing around them. Each step Taharqa took was calculated, and though the people remained suffering, a sense of hope began to stir. Justice was coming, invisible but inevitable, and the empire's long-awaited reckoning was drawing near. The day of reckoning arrived. In the grand hall of the royal palace, Taharqa presented the meticulously gathered ledgers before the pharaoh, high priests, and key provincial governors. Every fraudulent transaction, every misappropriated grain shipment, every secret loan was laid bare. Murmurs of shock rippled through the room as the scale of betrayal became undeniable. The corrupt officials, who had once believed themselves untouchable, froze as their schemes were exposed. Some attempted feeble denials, but Taharqa's evidence was unassailable. Military officers secured the palace gates, ensuring no escape, while scribes publicly read aloud the illicit contracts and falsified accounts. Outside, the markets reacted violently. Merchants who had lent gold demanded immediate repayment, while provinces that had been deprived of rations rejoiced at the impending restoration. The empire's financial machinery ground to a halt, but this time in justice's name rather than greed's. The pharaoh, confronted with the full extent of his advisor's betrayal, ordered immediate confiscation of illicit wealth and reassignment of resources to the people. The echo of justice reverberated through Egypt. For the first time, the empire understood that deception had limits, and those who betrayed the common good could not hide behind grandeur. Months after the unmasking, the empire began to breathe again. The corrupt officials were stripped of their ill-gotten wealth, their estates seized, and many faced public exile. Trade slowly resumed along the Nile, and granaries were replenished under the watchful eye of trustworthy governors. Taharqa, once a lone accountant, quietly returned to his duties, his victory uncelebrated but deeply felt, the empire's salvation quietly etched into his legacy. The pharaoh himself, chastened by betrayal, began reforms to prevent future abuses. Yet, the lesson was bittersweet. While justice had triumphed this time, the shadow of human greed loomed over every golden coin and every decision of power. The empire survived, but the memory of near collapse served as a haunting reminder of how fragile trust can be when wealth tempts the mighty. And so history whispered its timeless truth. Gold can build empires, but greed can shatter them in a single, silent stroke. Viewers, reflect on this. Do you think greed always gets caught? Could vigilance and courage prevent another collapse? Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, and stay tuned. Countless forgotten financial betrayals await, each with lessons etched in the annals of human folly and resilience.